Good morning, Washington. Good afternoon, all the ships at sea. How you all doing? This is Dave. Big Dave. Big Dave. On this rainy, cold, damp 27th of November, a Tuesday here in the Washington area. And it's a Tuesday in Chicago and LA, too. So, what's the big news today? Sad news to report today. We're hearing that the great Bill Dalton has passed away. I moved to the Washington area in 1972, okay? And I used to live in Philadelphia when I was a kid, in the Philadelphia area, New Jersey. And I remember all the cool radio stations were on AM. You know, the top 40 stations, the cool middle-of-the-road stations, the talk stations, they were all on AM. FM was kind of easy listening, kind of, you know, that kind of elevator music, or you had that progressive-y rock stuff, you know, which I wasn't into at the time. You know, weird stuff was on FM, or just relaying the AM signal. But your main stuff was on AM, okay? AM, you know, whatever. So we came down here to Washington, my family did, and I'm tuning down the AM dial and going, you know, Washington's AM radio isn't very good. There were some cool stations, the old Weem and Wheel and stuff like that, and Winks. But, you know, at night you couldn't hear half the stations, and there were bad signals. And so I just went over to FM, and I suddenly went, you know what? In Washington, the FM market was so much better than the AM dial was. And one of the reasons why that was, of course, the Washington area was not being an industrial city, and it didn't really get growing down here till the 60s. So, you know, we just didn't get a lot of good AM allocations. But one of the guys that saw that early on and made the move to FM was Bill Dalton. Now, Bill Dalton passed away Monday down in Naples, Florida. But Bill was a maverick in radio, and especially in the Washington market, because he saw the value of FM way before everybody else did. This was 1968. This is when almost everybody was listening to AM radio. This is when cars only had AM radios. You know, if you bought a car in the late 60s, it only had an AM radio because that's all that mattered. So Bill, you know, he came down to Washington. He'd worked at Philadelphia's WIP, which was then owned by Metro Media, middle-of-the-road station. I remember my parents listening to that a lot. And came down here to Washington and realized, you know, the AM signals down here weren't so hot. FM is really cool, and you can do stereo with it. You can do better fidelity, and that's what he did. He really pushed FM, and Washington became, because of him, in large respect, an early adapter, whatever, to the FM way of things. So by the early 70s, by the mid-70s, you know, most of Washington radio listening was done to FM. And it took a lot longer in a lot of other big cities. You know, it wasn't until the 80s and even the 90s before FM really became huge in a lot of these big cities, where Washington back in the 70s, you know, people were listening to WASH. They were listening to PGC on 95.5, WASH on 97.1. You know, PGC was a top 40 hit station, and they were huge back in the mid-70s on 95.5. You could barely hear them on 1580 AM. You know, but WASH was a cool station. It was a full-service station. You know, it had news at the top of the hour. It had its own news department. It had very distinctive personalities. It was all live and local. And, you know, it just bled local. This is a local station, and it was a community station, and it really sounded like Washington. It was all, you know, live and local 24/7 with news and features and the whole shebang. And, you know, that kind of radio just doesn't exist anymore. You know, we get these corporate imprints, you know. But Bill was a great guy. Never met him, never knew him, but heard a lot about him. And he passed away on Monday. You know, after Bill worked at WASH for a while, and he went off to some other stations. I think he went out to LA for a while. He came back to the Washington area, and he and his wife bought 104.1 WXTR in La Plata, Maryland, and turned it into a really cool oldie station for many years, for a couple decades. I think he only owned it up through the late 80s, but still, it was a really cool station. And, you know, he knew the value of FM, and he saw 20, 30 years before a lot of other people did the value of FM in terms of, hey, one day this is going to be the radio. You know, people are not going to be listening to AM anymore, like today. So tip of the old camo cap, which I have over on the table there, and I'm not going to go over and get to the great and the late Bill Dalton, who was a true visionary in terms of local radio. And that's that. Wow. Okay, so then I thought, okay, since we're talking about the old Wash today, let's go have a gander at some old Wash graphics. So let's take a look. You know, this was Wash, a graphic from Wash and Metro Media. Remember, the station was owned by Metro Media. It's long before Clear Channel got it. Metro Media stereo in Washington. Of course, Metro Media used to own WCBM in Baltimore. And they used to own WIP in Philly. And they were all really cool middle-of-the-road, what they called middle-of-the-road, which we now call adult contemporary formats. This was the, this is just, I presume, some Wash staffers, more likely today than they were back then. I'm looking and nobody's standing out. Let me see if I can focus that a little better. Yeah, I'm not recognizing any of those. Bob Duckman. I do recognize Bob Duckman there in the back. That's the only one that's coming out right at the moment. And Bob, of course, worked on Wash for many years. This is Wash from way back. Oh, wow. When was this? I don't see a date on this, but this is a pretty old graphic from Wash. Way before Bill Dalton worked there. And this is Wash, another Wash staffer. This looks like more of the 70s. There's Walt Starling. Pretty sure that's him. I do know some of these guys. Jerry Edwards is that. Don't put me on the spot here. Me, please, don't put me on the spot. Somebody can tell me who these people are. But there they are. There's some Washers. And that's current, a more current logo for Wash. Here we are. Okay, John Bodner was probably one of those guys. And there we go from Wash. This was probably circa mid-70s. Yeah, that, you know, the bearded guy there, that was probably John Bodner. And there's a Wash guy. Well, okay, here we go. Here's the names. Although I can hardly read them in this picture. John Bodner. You can kind of read them. Eddie Gallaher. There's Eddie in the middle. John Dowling up there at the top. Jim Lashley. There we go. That was Jim Lashley in that previous picture. There we go. Jim Lashley. Joe. I can't read these names. But anyhow, there they are. Maybe we'll get maybe I have a better picture of that. This is a washing machine from Wash. And there we go. And there's another Wash logo-y thing. And some more. Okay, these are some other people or whatever. And of course, we do have it. Let's see, Wash, Eddie Gallaher, and Barton Eckert. Let's listen to this.
Three Dog Night wishing joy to the world. Okay, don't forget now we got $69 in the cash call jackpot. You're listening to the Eddie Gallaher Show, and this is Metro Media Stereo, WASH, Washington. It's 7:30. Good morning. This is Barton Eckert in the WASH newsroom. The news is sponsored by House and Home Real Estate Corporation. Police in Houston, Texas are digging for bodies at this hour. They've found 8 murder victims so far buried beneath a boathouse. The police were brought to the scene by 17-year-old Wayne Henley. Henley says he was at a paint-sniffing party when he and some other people passed out. Houston Police Detective Breck Porter says when police got to the boathouse, they found the bodies of the 8 people.
He would get his victims in his apartment and tie them up with the chains and handcuffs.
Here's Washington's weather. Continued sunny, hot, and humid today and tomorrow. High in the 90s. Partly cloudy and warm tonight. Low in the mid-70s. Skies are hazy, but the sun is shining a bit. Winds are out of the southwest at 8 miles an hour. The humidity is 79%. The temperature is 75 degrees. Looking at traffic, accidents are reported at 3rd and Maryland Southwest, in the inbound lane of Route 95 at the 14th Street Bridge, at 5th and L Streets Northwest, and at 17th and Benning Road Northeast. A malfunctioning traffic light is also reported at 3rd and Sheridan Northwest, tying up traffic there. The news was sponsored by House and Home Real Estate Corporation, exclusive marketers for Woodley Park Towers. This is Barton Eckert, WASH News. It's 24 before 8 on the Eddie Gallaher Show.
And the late, great Jim Croce there with the bad Leroy Brown on 97.1 Wash FM. A tip of the old... Okay, I got the camo cap. Where's the camo cap? Tip of the old camo cap. Barton Eckert's still around, although he doesn't sound that young anymore. Man, he sounded young there, didn't he? He sounded like he was about 12. Barton, Barton, Barton. All right, folks, that's Dave TV for today. A little flashback to the old Wash Radio. 97.1 Wash FM. Still a pretty cool station. Love Lauren, Lori and Lou, and Louie and Lori and all them. And way to go there. All right, folks, that's Dave TV for the 27th of November, 2012. Book 'em, Dano.